Dear African culture viewers, today I bring you this story. Circumcision is well known to be practiced in Africa. It is even estimated that 130 million girls and women are affected worldwide by this practice. Every year, 2 million girls undergo circumcision, which is about 600 cases occurring every day. The practice involves an enormous cost in human suffering, which in turn has an effect on the household economy, considering that most circumcision practicants are poor. Complications resulting from circumcision put an additional burden on health systems. Circumcision is associated with complications during childbirth from keloids, an area of irregular fibrous tissue formed at the site of a scar or injury that occurs due to an overgrowth of scar tissue. Reconstruction surgeries for young girls who have suffered vaginal visceral fistulae also increase the burden on health systems. Circumcision has contributed in some people's views of Africa's ignorance. What a lot of people do not know is that it is practiced mostly in the rural areas and within the poor African tribes. How does the rest of the world see circumcision in Africa? The African Information Society is developing very fast. Information and communications technologies, ICTs, are no longer a novelty. Daily life has changed completely, and many certainties and practices have been modified, especially for youth. One might therefore wonder whether it would be relevant to look at the consequences this could have, in Africa and elsewhere, on how female circumcision is perceived, considered, and addressed. Circumcision is seen to be a very common thing, almost part of the everyday life in Africa. An outsider can say that these practices are ongoing today because of the lack of education in Africa. However, for someone who grew up in it, it is normal and it must be done. There was a story of a woman who grew up uncircumcised in her tribe, and somehow she ended up coming to the United States. A few years later, she went back to her home country to get circumcised because for her it's something that had to be done. This shows that circumcision is not only ongoing because of lack of education, but because it is cultural and is of high importance to some people. Girls who have undergone female genital cutting are more vulnerable to complications during delivery. The risk of mortality and morbidity is heightened by the fact that fertility is high and women deliver several times over their reproductive years. Female genital cutting has also been found to be associated with increased risk of contracting HIV/AIDS. The males, however, the most common complications associated with circumcision are bleeding and infection. Side effects related to anesthesia are possible as well. Rarely, circumcision might result in foreskin problems. For example, the foreskin might be cut too short or too long. The foreskin might fail to heal properly, and the remaining foreskin might reattach to the end of the penis, requiring minor surgical repair. The male circumcision is the circumcision that has always caused controversial debates. Women question why the male circumcision is so not painful compared to women one. Well, a very basic answer to that is we do not have the same parts, so how can we have the same circumcision? Male circumcision itself is not very practiced in Africa because Africa is a male-dominant continent. It is mostly practiced within the Muslims, which are a minority in Africa. Circumcision in some cases is more about respecting cultural beliefs than it being about lacking education and human rights. During the 1950s in Kenya, there was a song released titled, "I Am Going to Circumcise Myself." This was to mock people who thought circumcision was unlawful and unnecessary. These are all facts that never made it to the mainstream media, so in result people have a very shallow understanding circumcision. This includes me and all other Africans who left home at a young age. So even back then people didn't agree with it. That means that circumcision is not just ongoing because of lack of education or culture, but because sometimes it is a choice, like the example that was stated in previous paragraphs. The stigmatization of the practice of female genital mutilation, FGM, as a violent, discriminatory and sexist practice and a denial of rights was expressed by feminists and human rights movements in the series of major international and regional conferences held in the 1980s and 1990s, which led to a number of international and regional conventions. The rights-based approach for the protection of women and children was broadly adopted by the institutions working on the issue of FGM, particularly in terms of addressing the legal dimension. However, it reinforced the portrayal of FGM as a victimizing practice, with all of the consequences that this kind of perception can produce. Similarly, it would seem that the analysis of FGM in gender terms did not extend outside of the framework of feminist analysis. There are too many documented facts on circumcision, so therefore we always get the scholar version of things and almost never a personal view. I am privileged to know someone who escaped circumcision. To my surprise, she told me that a lot of her fellow village friends do not agree with circumcision, but they still end up reluctantly going through it. So I asked, why do something that is against their will? She simply answered because of fear. It is not easy running away as my friend did, and up until today she is banned and cursed from her village with the grown-ups. However, a lot of the young girls envy her courage, but the environment they are in and the low self-esteem makes it hard, unimaginable, and almost impossible. My friend was very lucky because she got the help of her aunt and cousins and her uncle, who happened to know a man who worked with the Canadian embassy. She then started living with him, and soon enough her papers were ready for her to escape her fate. While having this discussion, she was surprised when she told her that circumcision exists here in North America, and then she was upset that Africa seems to be the only place associated with circumcision. In conclusion, I think that there is a lot of educating that needs to happen, and it should be done on both sides, the West and Africa. Circumcision is becoming less about education and more about cultural beliefs. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.